Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am wishing you a happy Tuesday and hoping you had a wonderful weekend. I had a great weekend. Nothing exciting, but it was a very good weekend, and I am sort of ready for the week. I know it's already Tuesday, so I should have been ready for the week yesterday, but some Tuesdays are very Monday-y, and that's kind of what today is. Not in a bad way, just kind of in a Monday sort of way. Let's talk about a book. The book is called Runner. The author is Tracy Clark, and she is my guest today. This is the second book in her Chicago Mystery series. Let me give you the description from the book jacket. Chicago in the dead of winter can be brutal, especially when you're scouring the frigid streets for a missing girl. 15-year-old Ramona Titus has run away from her foster home. Her biological mother, Lisa Evans, is a recovering addict who admits she failed Ramona often in the past. But now she's clean, and she's determined to make up for her mistakes, if Cass can only help her find her daughter. Cass visits Ramona's foster mother, Dolores Poole, who is also desperate to bring the girl home. Ramona came to Dolores 6 months ago, angry and distrustful, but was slowly opening up. The police are on the search, but Cass has sources closer to the streets and a network of savvy allies. Yet, it seems Ramona doesn't want to be found, and Cass soon begins to understand why. Ramona is holding secrets dark enough to kill for, and anyone who helps her may be fair game. And if Ramona can't run fast enough and hide well enough to keep the truth safe, she and Cass may both be out of time. So, that is the description of Runner by Tracy Clark. Again, it is the second in the Chicago Mystery series. That series has the main character of Cassandra Rains, who is a private investigator. She is a former cop, now turned private investigator, as so often is the case. A couple things that I love about this series: the fact that it is a female PI, which is becoming a little more common, but is still not as common as one might hope. And the fact that she is not only a female PI, she is a female person of color who is a PI. And so then your statistics drop a little bit more. You don't often get as many of those. And so I'm loving the representation in this book, because we need to see, as you say, I say, everybody keeps saying, we need to be able to see lots of different types of people in the books we read. We need to be able to see ourselves in the books that we read. And so I love that more and more people are writing the books and the characters that they didn't necessarily get to see when they were growing up. So I was thinking, as I was reading through that description, there's a lot of women in that description, right? There's the foster mother, the biological mother, Cass, the runaway, etc., etc. And so it's a very, just if you just read that dust jacket, you're thinking this is a very female-centric book, and I'm down with that too. But then, of course, there's the element of it being a bit of a thriller. There's always, the stakes are always higher than just a simple case of a teenager who has run away. And I think even the weather plays a part in making this a thriller, because Chicago in the winter is, no thank you. I don't want to live there. I used to travel to Chicago twice a year for meetings, and one of those meetings was in, I want to say February. It was horrible. Whatever month it was horrible. And I'm good. I don't need to live there. Montana winters were bad enough. Chicago winters with the lake effect, no, thank you. And I like winter, but I'm going to go with no on that. But the winter is almost another character in this book, in that you just can't get around it, right? There, you have to battle through it, and so just one more element in this book that kind of, one more piece of that puzzle to make the whole picture and to make this a really intriguing read. Let's go ahead now and let Tracy talk about her own book. Again, the book is called Runner. It is the second in the Chicago Mystery Series, and the author is Tracy Clark.
Hi, Tracy. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And we are going to talk about your new book, Runner. It is one of your Chicago mysteries. Before we get to the book, though, if you would please share a little bit about yourself, that would be very helpful.
Oh, let's see. I'm a native Chicagoan. I happen to sort of currently live in the city that I was born and raised in. It's a city that I enjoy immensely writing about. I have a background in journalism, which sort of hinders me and helps me in sort of the word count, because as a journalist, you're sort of writing for economy, and novels are sort of the opposite. So it's a sort of a weird sort of dance that you have to do. But it took me 20 years to sort of get to this point. A lot of failure and query letters and rejection and all that sort of writers have to go through, but I am sort of firmly in the writing community now, which I'm happy about. And I sort of delve in with both feet. I'm now a member of Sisters in Crime and Mystery Writers of America. I'm on Crime Writers of Color, and I'm on a national board of Baoshakan. I just sort of went full bore. I'm on the board of my local chapters for Sisters in Crime and MWA. I'm all about volunteering and sort of get the next generation of writers in there. So I'm very busy, very happy to be busy, and on to the next project.
Yeah, no sense in going halfway, huh?
Nope, you're going to go in, may as well go in whole hog.
That's right. Go big or go home, Tracy.
Yes, that's exactly.
All right, so this is the fourth novel in this series, is that correct?
It is, yes.
Okay, so can you give an overview of the series itself?
Well, it's a classic PI series. That's sort of my soft spot, my sort of sweet spot. I like PI fiction. And so when I started to sort of really think about a writing career and what kind of stories that I wanted to write, that was the sort of first thing that came to me. I like PI. I like that convention, that character. So this is a classic PI series. It's got a African-American female as the protagonist, as the main character. She is going from case to case in the city of Chicago, and I sort of move her all around the city, south side, north side, wherever. And as the cases come up, she's got to sort of catch the bad guys, service her clients, make sure that justice is done, and in the classic format of the PI genre. So not really highbrow or anything like that. She's sort of snarky. There are things that she sort of gets right, things she sort of fails at, just like normal human beings do. So I sort of, she's a flawed character, she's a heroic character, but she's not like a Superwoman or Wonder Woman. She's sort of human, down to earth, and she's just sort of getting the job done as the job presents itself.
Yeah, thank you. You said snarky, and I love that. I mean, you can't have someone who's too perfect. You need a snark. I need a little snark in my life.
Yeah, that's kind of boring. Nobody wants perfect. Nobody's perfect.
Right, exactly. So then talk about Runner and the premise for this story.
Well, Runner is her latest case. She's presented with a runaway 15-year-old who has run away from her foster home. The mother comes to her, a strange mother, and she wants her daughter found. The police, she feels, are not sort of taking it seriously enough, and she wants somebody sort of working for her. And so she comes to Cass Raines, our PI, and she asks her to sort of find her daughter where the police have not been able to find her. And so as Cass sort of follows these leads and tries to find the kid, she certainly found out that she's not the only one looking for her. So now it becomes a race between her and these other forces to try to find the child first before the other side does. And of course, insanity ensues and bodies are dropped. And when we get to the end, hopefully everything is sort of resolved. So classic PI, like I said, bad guys, good guys, butting up against cops and bureaucracy and all that. And there's the PI there, right at the center, sort of making sure that the client is sort of satisfied and things get done.
Let's go ahead and take our first break of the podcast. When we come back, Tracy will be talking about her inspiration for this story and this series. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. I am speaking today with author Tracy Clark. Let's go ahead and return to that interview.
And what was your initial inspiration for this particular installment?
Well, I sort of start thinking about the next book. I'm halfway through the one I'm writing, just because you're just sort of pushing around for ideas and what you get nervous that you might not come up with another idea for the next book. So I think I sort of ran across an item in a newspaper or something about runaways. And that, of course, then starts the mind working. What about runaways? What are the major issues with runaways? Why did they run away? What are some of the factors? And as the sort of idea starts to percolate in your brain about runaways and what might happen or what could happen, the story just sort of unfolded from there. So as I finished that book I was working on and started the new one, that became the theme, runaways. And then it was a question of having to create a story around that. You sort of bring it down to specifics. That one character, that missing 15-year-old. And then you sort of build upon that and find out what might have happened, what could have happened, what other forces are in play. And then you just sort of build it. It's sort of like Lego blocks. You just sort of build it one block on top of the other. And that's how Runner happened. Just that spark of an idea about runaways, and then sort of creating a world around that, building characters around that, and then the complication of what could happen, who dies, why, who are the suspects. It just sort of is fiction. You're building fiction like you build anything else, and that's how the story happens. I don't seem to have that knack for outlining as some writers do. I can sort of look at it and see that might be the optimal way to do it. But I just sort of, jump in. I'm a pantser, which means I sort of fly by the seat of my pants. And when I get to that next book, which was Runner, I just start on page 1, missing runaway, and then I sort of build it from there. I get lost a lot of times. I sort of paint myself into corners that I have to get out of. But that's how we kind of do it. My brain doesn't seem to work efficiently the other way, so it's page by page, paragraph by paragraph, until I get to the end.
Well, everybody's writing style is different, and so
Exactly,
you answered my next question. I was going to ask you if you're a plotter or a pantser, and you're a pantser.
I am a pantser.
I had one author say that she's somewhere in the middle, and so she's a planter.
You can sort of see the other side. The grass is always greener on the other side. You can see how maybe it might be easier for outliners, so they actually know what's coming and where the sort of beats are and where the themes are. But I can't. My brain just doesn't work that way. I have to sort of give a sort of a slim outline of what I think the story is going to be about to the publishers, and that's what they use to sort of, come up with cover art or, the marketing part of it. But once I've done that, I sort of throw it away, and I sort of know what the story is kind of about, but I don't know until I actually finish, whether or not that's what it actually is about. So I sort of build it on the page. I just have to do it that way.
Right. Well, you got to go with what works for you. Yep. Talk a little bit more about Cass, the PI. What about her do you think will resonate with readers?
I think what I liked most about Cass is that despite the fact that she's not Wonder Woman or Superwoman, that she sort of realizes that things are not right. And she just sort of can't stand the fact that there's some people who sort of get lost out in the world. I mean, they sort of fall between the cracks, and they don't get the breaks or the attention that they could get or deserve to get. And she's sort of like a champion for the underdog. This 15-year-old kid who's missing has fallen through the cracks of a humongous system, the foster care system. There are agencies and bureaucracies out there that are supposed to help these children. Sometimes they don't help all of them. And for this specific story, this specific character, this is one of the kids who sort of fell between the cracks. So she is the person who is out there sort of beating the bushes and plowing through snow in the middle of a Chicago winter, looking for this missing 15-year-old. And that's the sort of character that she is. She's sort of intrepid and sort of dogged, and her determination to sort of catch those people, these kids, these people, these communities that are sort of left out or sort of forgotten or not getting the equal access that they need. So she does that despite the fact that she's got her own issues to sort of deal with. I sort of flawed her up as much as I could because I think that's a more interesting character for readers to sort of, dive in and sort of attach themselves to. None of us sort of are perfect in our real lives. And I don't think most readers like sort of reading about characters who are perfect, because we are not. So I flawed her up. I gave her a lot of baggage. I gave her positive traits, but also negative ones. So I tried to make her as human as I could possibly make her, despite the fact that she's a book person as opposed to a real person. So I think she's really unique in the fact that she doesn't get everything right. She doesn't do everything right. She does things for the right reasons, but maybe not always in the right way. So she's out there fighting the good fight. She's doing what she can to sort of make a difference. And I like her journey. I like the journey that I put her on. I want to be interested in how she sort of resolves everything, not only the case, but also her sort of negative things. So she's working through some stuff, and I will sort of string that out as much as I can because I think it's interesting. And hopefully the readers will think so too.
Well, for me personally, I started to resonate with her right away because I was laughing. She dressed for cuteness rather than practicality.
Right.
she
As we all do.
Right. She did not dress for the Chicago storm that hit.
No.
It just made me think of when I grew up in Montana, and I was remembering one time that it wasn't winter yet, but it was fall, but I dressed totally for summer, and I froze.
I think each of us, I think any city in the Midwest or wherever there is winter, they sort of make that mistake once in a season.
Yes.
They sort of go out there, they venture out one day too long in the wrong conditions, but then that's it. Then they're in it. But we make that one mistake, and then we're in for the season. But yeah, I think that's true.
And then even if it's 90 the next day, I'm dressing for fall.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You get me one time and one time only.
Exactly. How has Cass evolved over the series?
Well, I think when we meet her in book one, she's sort of like a really closed shell. And I think as the books have progressed, she's opened up a little bit more, trusting a little bit more. She sort of isolated herself in book one. She's sort of coming off a a transition period. We meet her in book 1 as a police detective working homicide for Chicago Police Department. Something sort of dramatic happens, and her career is over, and she has to sort of pivot to something else. And the something else is private investigation. So when we meet her in book 1, she's quite a different character in a lot of cases than she is in book 4. She's learned to sort of open up and to sort of trust people and to sort of deal with some of the baggage and some of the trauma that she's sort of dealing with, instead of sort of closing it off, but sort of opening it up, examining it a little bit more, and learning how to deal with it, in addition to all the things she has to do, like the case and all the people around her, the police, the bureaucracy, and all that. So I think I'm opening up her a little bit more book by book. I don't want to do it sort of in dramatic fashion, because I don't think people as a whole in real life sort of change dramatically, on a dime like that. She's sort of learning, as we all do, progressing as we all hope we have to do as we go along in our lives. But I kind of like to keep that sort of human factor, that sort of learning, progressing, getting a little further, falling a little back, just sort of making it through life as we all do.
And you mentioned that you the concept or the idea of runaways, you started looking into that. What other types of research did you do for this book?
Well, I sort of looked a little bit. I don't like to do a lot of research because seems almost like a writer math. Kind of have to do homework. I don't like to do that too much of it. I'm more interested in the story itself. But for this one, I sort of looked at the foster care system and how it works and how big it is. It's amazing how many kids are in this system and what has to be done and how many resources are available to help them. So I looked at it at that point and just to see how it works. And then I looked in sort of story-wise as to how I could take how it's supposed to work, and then sort of think about ways where it might not work, and how someone out there with not too good motivations could sort of twist it and sort of mute it a little bit to sort of make it work for them as opposed to the kids. So I looked a little bit about the foster care system, how it works, how to pervert it then for fiction, how many kids in terms of numbers are sort of affected, and what resources are out there normally to sort of help these kids, and which sort of led me to sort of coming up with the idea for Sister Barb and the sort of the help bus, the love bus. That came out sort of as looking at sort of how resources might work on the street in the neighborhood for kids that sort of fell through the cracks, so to speak. So a little research, more story, more character, which I think resonates more than numbers and statistics and stuff like that. So learning about it, how it works, then pervert it, then bring it down to the character level and sort of make it in a form that readers would enjoy and sort of identify with and sort of engage with.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and take our second break of the podcast, but when we come back, Tracy will be talking more about character development and how she goes about writing her characters, developing those characters, etc. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. I'm speaking today with author Tracy Clark. Let's go ahead and return to that interview about her new novel, Runner.
How about character development? Do you have a pretty good idea of each character before you start writing, or do you kind of do that the same way you do your plot? Do you like that to develop as you write?
Well, I had, when I first started out with this series, I had Cass's voice in my head, but that's it. I didn't have, cast of characters already set. So I went to page one, and Cass was there, and then as the story developed, the characters sort of popped in as I needed them. As I've gone through the 4 books, those secondary characters, those characters who sort of come in and out, have sort of fleshed out and become more human people with their own personalities and characteristics. But I didn't have any of that to begin with. I just had Cass and her voice in my head. And as a classic pantser, as I needed them, as the page sort of presented itself, those characters popped up. And luckily for me, they were characters that I could sort of live with and sort of get behind and want to do something with. So I think as we come to book 4, we have her, what I call them, her Scooby Gang, who have sort of hung in with her from book 1. And they're quite different, like her, from the first book, because I know more about them as I've gone through 4 books. So I have backgrounds for them. I know who they are. I know what personalities to sort of bring forth. But all of that stuff for Panthers, we just sort of, come up. It just pops in our head. It just pops in our head, and we use it if it's usable. We let it go if it isn't. We come up with something else. So it's all on the fly, all by the seat of our pants. And if we're lucky, it holds, and it's positive.
In a way, it might be a little easier than the plotters, because I hear so many people talk about how their characters surprise them or go in a different direction than they were expecting. And so for you, that might be a little bit easier to go with that change.
Yeah, it is, because they surprise me all the time. A lot of the dialogue and stuff like that just sort of comes as she's talking to them, as Cass is talking to them. And it sort of pours out from their characters and what I've been able to sort of flesh out and who they are and where they come from and how they relate to her. It's also very fun to sort of do it that way. It's a sort of a spark of excitement. You never know what's going to happen. You know where your story wants to go, where you need it to go, but you don't know how you're going to get there. And, you might change it up a little bit, but it's all discovery, and it's all great.
Are there, besides the location, Chicago, are there autobiographical elements within your writing?
I think so. I don't have any experience in sort of police work or anything like that. I've come from journalism. So all of it is creativity and sort of looking around and looking at the genre itself. PI fiction sort of has sort of a built-in sort of a framework. You have this sort of crusader character who was sort of working outside bureaucracy and sort of drawing outside the lines and sort of making their own code of ethics and all the rest of that. So I sort of stick pretty close to those conventions of the PI genre, and then sort of create or invent things that are a little bit above that. So she's a African-American female doing PI work. She is from the south side of Chicago. I'm from the south side of Chicago, so I'm using the neighborhood, the people in the neighborhood, but I'm also sort of expanding through the entire city. So I like sort of highlighting the city I live in. I think it's a great city, a great place to sort of set crime fiction. So I have a lot of opportunities and a lot of areas that I can sort of dive into and sort of dig into and sort of find little nooks and crannies where I can sort of highlight things. So it's all fun and it's all great. And I sort of look forward to getting back to Cass as quickly as I can.
And what do you think it is about crime fiction that draws you to the genre, both for reading and writing?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know what sort of motivated me to sort of go to crime fiction as opposed to anything else. I just sort of I guess that's sort of the kinds of things that I enjoyed reading. Even as a kid, 12, 13 years old, Agatha Christie I started off with. There's also, Nancy Drew and that sort of thing. I don't know. There's something about, I think, I don't know. It's sort of like a morality play. There's good and evil. There's negative and positive. You have a main character and a bad guy that has to be vanquished. I like that sort of conflict. I like the fact that murder fiction has pretty high stakes. I mean, someone has been killed, a life has been taken, and somebody's got to care about that. I think that's what sort of draws me to science fiction too. This is the ultimate crime. The worst thing you can do to a person is to steal their life, and there's got to be somebody out there who cares about the loss, wants to do something about the fact that that loss has occurred. And you sort of create, for me, I think what really motivates me is to sort of have that character there who is sort of standing at that gate between good and evil, loss and grief, saying that no, this is not acceptable. I am not going to be the one who sort of stands aside while this happens. So that's that sort of heroic knight-like character that your main character becomes, standing at the breach. This is beyond the pale. This loss is not acceptable. I'm going to do something about it. So I think that that's what sort of drew me to the genre of PI and crime and murder fiction. And I think it's kind of sort of my sweet spot. I kind of like that conflict.
In terms of the series, do you have an arc in mind for Cass, or are you just going to keep writing the books until you feel like they've run their course?
Well, I do have sort of a sketchy arc in mind, but being a pantser, I haven't written anything down. I think I know where I want Cass to go. She still has a lot to learn. She still has a lot to deal with and to come to terms with. So there's still a lot to say about how she does that, how far she gets to evolution, because she has a lot of baggage drawing behind her. So I like to think that I have an idea of where I want her to go. And when I get back to her, hopefully I can sort of make that come true. But I've got 2 standalones to come before that. Different set of characters, different sort of motivations to sort of dive into. But when I get back to Cass, yeah, I have plenty of room to sort of go. I left her sort of in a good position at the end of book 4. She can either go left or she can either go right, which is an interesting place to sort of put a character. So now I have to decide which way she goes, what happens next, how much she grows, how little she grows. And all of that is sort of exciting to sort of play with. So I can't wait till I get back to her to see which way she goes. I have no idea at this point. I just sort of left her at the crossroads, and I have plenty of time to sort of figure out what happens next.
That's so mean, Tracy, to just leave her there.
You know what? I thought so first when I did it, but then I said, the more I thought about it, it's kind of interesting for me as a writer. Hopefully it's interesting for the reader too, but it's an interesting point to stop. She is at a crossroads, and I have plenty of time to sort of figure it out, but the reader at the moment now is stuck with her standing there. She can either go this way or that, and they have no idea. I have no idea, and we'll find out together.
And so what are you working on now? Are you working on those 2 standalones, or are those completed?
I am going through second revisions on book 5, first standalone, third person as opposed to first. Completely new set of characters. Same city though. This is my city. I kind of like writing about it. It's tentatively titled Hide, and it will release December of 2022. And I'm feeling pretty good about it. Still have a couple of revisions to go before I hand it in. But it's feeling pretty good. It's got a nice feel to it. I like the characters, and we'll see what happens with them. And I have one more standalone after that one. And then we'll see what happens with Cass. I'll see which way she'll go.
So rude. Just leaving a character at a crossroads, leaving the readers at a crossroads. Oh, authors, they're so mean. We're going to take our third and final break of the podcast. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author Tracy Clark.
So for readers of the series who are waiting at that crossroads with Cass, do you have an estimated pub date for book 5?
I don't. We'll have to wait and see. She might be standing at that crossroads for a couple of years now. That gives me plenty of time to come up with something brilliant. But right now, she's sort of standing there, frozen in freeze frame, and we'll find out much later what happens.
All right. So you were a journalist, which means you've been writing in some capacity for a while now. But when did you decide that you wanted to write fiction for publication?
I was kind of one of those weird kids who always wrote. I was a little kid, maybe 8 or 9, with a notebook under my mattress with little stories in them, with little character sketches in them. So I always wrote. I don't think I ever stopped. I mean, the second I had a pencil and knew my ABCs, I was writing stuff. I really didn't sort of have this sort of burning desire to sort of write a book until maybe high school or so, when I sort of started reading serious books, Sue Grafton, Sarah Paretsky, around 82 or 83, I think, when that sort of wonderful wave of female crime writers sort of hit. And we had all of these wonderful, strong female characters in fiction. That sort of hit me about the time that I sort of came about the idea that maybe I could write a book myself after reading several books and numerous books all through my childhood. So it sort of hit me at the same point where I sort of had to make a decision whether or not I was going to sort of go for it or just sort of let it go and just be an avid reader. And I sort of started writing the books that I enjoyed reading, serious characters with strong female characters as the lead. And I figured I could probably do this. I think I'm going to try it. I'm going to try to write one from my perspective with a character that is close to me and just see how it went. And it took from that, I guess, decision to sort of go for it to my first book deal, almost more than 20 years. Just sort of writing and tearing stuff up and throwing stuff away and querying and getting rejected and piling the rejection letters up and just moving on and sort of teaching myself how to write an effective story. It just took me about 20 years as opposed to, overnight success. But, I wouldn't have it any other way. I sort of went through what I needed to go through to learn what I needed to learn. And it's all good. Nothing was wasted, the time or the energy or the motivation. It was all learning. It was all getting to this point.
So from that experience and your own 20-year journey, do you have advice for aspiring authors?
Well, I would just tell them to keep going. It's really hard to get discouraged. I mean, it's easy to sort of get discouraged in this business. It's a tough business. It's subjective. One editor might not like it. 5 more editors would. You just have to keep going, keep plugging away. If you get a rejection, don't sort of get depressed and sort of stop. If there's something in that rejection letter that helps you, that sort of gives you a hint as to what you might need to work on, take that advice, internalize it, use it, and move forward. It's all about sort of sticking in there, learning what you need to learn, getting where you need to go, and not giving up. I think if you can sort of get to the point where you give up, frustrated, then maybe that's not the thing for you. But you have to keep going. You have to keep going.
Thank you for that. Earlier, when you were talking about authors that you were reading, you mentioned Sue Grafton, and under your name on the cover of the book, it says Sue Grafton Memorial Award winner. Was that for this book or one of the other books?
This was for, what was it? I have no idea. I think it's for Borrowed Time. I won that for. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And what then are your favorite authors to read when you take time to read for yourself?
I like kind of everybody. I don't think I've come across any writer that I did not like. Sarah Paretsky, of course, Chicago-based writer here. One of my sort of influences, sort of in the early days. Of course, Sue Grafton. Valerie Wilson Wesley had a wonderful series, also sort of featuring an African-American female PI, Tamara Hale series. I love that. Matt Coyle is one of my current favorites. Hilary Davidson, I love her stuff. Anything in the PI genre, S.J. Roseanne, Matt Coyle, I love them all. I love it. I just love it. Anything that sort of gives me that strong character, that strong center, and that sort of good versus evil, that conflict, that sort of standing in the gap. Those characters I love. I will read anything. I do. My TBR pile at this moment, I'm looking at it right now, is sort of teetering to the side with books that I have to sort of get through. And I can't wait until I do. But right now, my revisions are sort of looming. But when I do, I've got them all here. I see something interesting that comes out or has just been released. I click it, and it's waiting for me when I'm ready for it. But I'm an avid reader. I think most writers are. And we just sort of read everything and anything. And I love it all. I just love it all.
Wonderful. I know you have a website, so if you can tell people what your website is as well as what social media platforms you're available on.
Well, yeah, TracyClarkBooks.com is my website. You can go there and drop me a message if you've got something to say. I'm always monitoring that and look forward to sort of hearing from readers. I'm also on Insta, TCClark2000. Twitter, TracyTC6161, and on Facebook, at tclark.com, tclarkbooks.com. So check me out, drop me a message, let's talk online, and it's all good.
All right, thank you for that. And we have talked about, we've talked about the series, we've talked about upcoming works, but is there anything that you hope to highlight during our time together that we haven't covered?
Well, I've got a short story coming out November the 9th in an anthology of crime writers of color writers. The anthology is titled Midnight Hour. 20 writers of color who have contributed to this anthology. It's absolutely wonderful. And I hope readers will check it out again, the 9th of November. So check it out. Come read it. It'll be good.
Thank you. And is that a standalone story, or does that involve cast?
No, it's a standalone story. It's all the stories are themed around midnight. So just my little inclusion is called Lucky 13. It's not cast, but it's kind of creepy, even for me.
All right. Excellent. It's a good time of year for creepy.
Right.
Yes. Tracy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about Runner, about cast, about writing in general. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you once again to Tracy for joining me to talk about her Chicago Mystery Series and cast and the new novel Runner, as well as some of the other things, other projects that she is working on. A couple of things. Well, first of all, if you are a fan of crime fiction, if you're a fan of PI stories, especially female PIs, female PIs who are women of color, then you should definitely check out Runner. I was thinking as I was going through and editing that I really liked what Tracy was saying during the interview about crime fiction where something is resolved, that she likes to read crime fiction because something is resolved. You know, the bad guy is brought to justice, someone stands up for good, and it made me think of romances and the happily ever after, and how sometimes we just want to know that things are going to work out, and so we read certain types of romances where we know there's going to be a happily ever after. And I'd never really thought of crime fiction in that way, but it's true. It is, you know, things get resolved, and I realized that Cass is left at a crossroads at the end of this book, but still the main story is resolved, right? And things are taken care of. So I'm with Tracy. I really appreciate that type of storytelling. Sometimes I just need things wrapped up. Life is up in the air enough as it is a lot of days, and so I need my reading to wrap itself up sometimes, and I appreciate it when it does. Also, a follow-up on the anthology that Tracy is a part of, Midnight Hour. It's coming out November 9th, as she said, but I looked it up after our interview, and it contains a story from another guest who's been on the podcast, E.A. Amar, so that's exciting. I was a little disappointed when I looked it up that I couldn't find all of the authors who are included in the anthology. I looked in a couple of places and did not see that, so maybe you'll have more luck if you look up Midnight Hour, the anthology. But I thought it was exciting that Tracy and Ed are both going to be in this anthology, and I will be checking it out when it comes out in a couple of weeks. So thank you to Tracy once again, and thank you as always to you, my listeners. If you are a fan of this podcast, you know what I'm going to say, right? Please take time to write a review, or if you don't want to write a review, you can always leave a starred review. Either one really helps us to get this podcast out to other book lovers such as yourselves. Also, follow on social media. I would love it if you would interact, but you don't even have to interact on social media. Just following helps. Whatever you can do to help the podcast, I would be very, very grateful. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. I'm actually kind of enjoying TikTok now. It still scares me. I still don't understand it. I don't know what I'm doing half the time, but I think I'm learning. So if you're on TikTok, please come follow and let me follow you back. I hope you'll join me on Friday's episode when I will be speaking with author Reese Hirsch about his new novel, Dark Tomorrow. It is another mystery, another thriller. This one is about cyber terrorism. So eek. You might not want to be on the internet after you listen to that interview, but I hope that you are having a wonderful Tuesday, that your Tuesday is not too Monday-ish, but I really, really hope that that Tuesday, or whatever day you're listening to this podcast, that your day involves plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.